What's up? Welcome in, Hoge Jahns, back from Florida, back from the owners' meetings, maybe slightly, just a little bit more tan.
I think I got some color.
Yeah. Yeah, the weather was horrible. We had to stay longer. Just such poor us. It was terrible.
The weather was horrible here in Chicago,
Right.
not there.
Well, that's important to point out. Yeah. It was fun. Thank you for everybody that listened, watched, however you consumed our interview with Ryan Poles last week. And your patience in getting it up because there was a little bit of a technical snafu in there, but we got it all out. I think everybody enjoyed it and appreciate everybody that watched it. I think it's got over 40,000 views on YouTube. So love the support. Also, apologies we didn't get you a second episode from Florida. That was all part of all of that. But to reward you or make up for it, we got an extra long episode today with Nate Tice and Kevin Fishbain both coming on. I think you're going to like those conversations. But yeah, Johnsy, any thoughts before we jump into Nate here
No,
about
it's
last week or
good to be
anything?
back. Yes, sorry we only got one episode out there to you guys last week. Hopefully you enjoyed that Ryan Poles show. The feedback was great as always. But yeah, this is if you're wondering if the Bears should still address their offensive line and you want to hear about more offensive linemen, maybe have a slight conversation about butt size. I think you're going to enjoy this show.
That's a pretty good tease right there. Yeah, absolutely. Our guy Nate Tice, who we always love talking to, he did a fun podcast that we got to tell you about as well. I think you're gonna like some of this insight. So let's jump right into it. Nate Tice joining Hoge Jahns once again. All right, let's bring in our friend Nate Tice to the program once again. And Nate, I wanted to start with this with you because and I'm gonna warn everyone, I'm about to plug somebody else's podcast probably harder than I ever have.
This is going
Because
somewhere. Here
yeah,
we go.
because if you don't know, and you should already know this, I hope most of our listeners do. But Nate's dad is Mike Tice, who of course Bears offense
Don't
coordinator, a
tell
line
him.
coach, and of course was the Vikings um the head coach for a long time. Anyway, Nate, you had your dad on your podcast, Football 301, to break down the offensive linemen in this draft class, and it was it was fantastic. And as somebody who covered your dad here in Chicago, it just took me right back to his tone of voice, the matter. He's got some Vic Fangio in him where he's just sort of
Yeah.
blunt and he's just matter of fact, just sometimes like dry. This is what I think. This is how it is. And I was like just glued into the podcast. I loved it.
Thank you, first off. It was a lot of fun and also surreal to be interviewing my dad, which was also, like, just a weird thing. Even in the introduction, I didn't know how to introduce him, like, coach, Mike, dad, like, I just all those things. But you're right, the matter of factness is, remember the, Key and Peele would do the Obama angry translator? I've always felt the opposite for my dad, where my dad would say something and I had to, like, soften the blow to somebody that was listening to it. I mean, he means well here. He's just trying to help you out here. Like, he just had to kinda always just had to soften how he would, say certain things. I felt like in Chicago, it was very fitting, but when you were in certain places, California, Florida, some of those people were kinda like got a little edginess to some of his bluntness, so I would appreciate it. I'd take it as a compliment at least.
So I don't want to like completely give away like everything on that podcast because I think everyone listening to this should go back to listen to your conversation with your dad. But his number one offensive lineman, you're going down your list of your guys, and then you get to Josh Connerly, and that's like his guy. Were you like
Yeah.
stunned by that, and maybe like what do you think of that, and what do you think that means? Like when you reconsider how this draft could play out.
Well, that's why I was glad to have him on there because he does he stays a little bit around it, but he care less about the consensus anyways, and that's what a
Yeah.
lot of coaches are like. They're in their own little bubble as well as all of us are. We have our own versions of bubbles. So that's why I was like, he has fresh eyes. He doesn't give a crap about what the what we all look at all these big boards, what all the public ones are, should be going top 10, should be going top 20. I like Josh Connerly a lot. I was one of the high guys on him. I had him on my midseason big board at like 26, and I was one of the guys that was like pretty high on him. And then he just blew that take out of the water, putting him at OT1. And I totally see what he's saying with him. I really liked him. I was curious if he had some strength concerns with him, and he absolutely did not. It's just because Connerly is an excellent athlete and has length. And like my dad pointed out, it really came together for him as far as technique wise, where he was really unlocking those athletic gifts. And actually, I just posted here right before I came on because I was watching the Oregon's tight end, Terrence Ferguson. I was like, yeah, I'm going to clip these. I've watched this game, but I haven't posted it for internet dopamine. So I posted Josh Connerly against Abdul Carter. Every one-on-one rep they have. Connerly dominated him. Just wasn't even close. Abdul Carter tried second moves, inside moves, and he just handled them completely. The only snap that he got edginess on him was something where Oregon was going hurry and went on the quick, and Abdul Carter was just able to jump the snap, which I don't consider a true win, but I included it on the cut up to be fair. But I think this guy is a first rounder. He's a legit tackle as well. There's so many tweeners in this class, which I'm sure we'll talk about, but there's so many guys that's like, is he a guard? Is he a tackle? Connerly is a true left tackle and has the athleticism and length for that. And it's not theory. It's not just an idea or projection. He's actually showing it against good competition. So like I said, I was high, and then my dad just said, hold my pencil. I'm gonna be even higher. I'm gonna be even higher on him. Just watch. So I thought that was awesome, and I totally agree with it, and I totally understand how he came to that thinking.
Yeah. So same thing. Like I want to make sure everybody goes back and listens to it, because the breakdown on all of these tackles and that could very well be in play for the Bears. They should go back and hear not only your dad's analysis, but your analysis of it too. But that being said, like, we got to address Will Campbell here, because you guys started with Will in that podcast, and I came away from that section of the pod being like, oh, they like him. I mean, there's nothing wrong. But then you kept going to other ones, and your dad was like, I would put this guy ahead of Will. Oh, I would put this guy ahead of Will. And all of a sudden there's like 3 or 4 guys ahead of Will Campbell. And I'm like, well, wait a minute here. Like, what's wrong with Will Campbell? So what did you take away from that whole conversation? Because again, it's sounded like you guys both like him, but maybe not as sold as it's just the arm length.
Yeah, my dad even brought up, like, he is big on the arm length stuff, but he also, and this is what he's ingrained to me, everybody wins in different ways and how you mitigate it. It's not always length. Length is just an easy way to kind of go like, okay, that's how you can counter. I actually thought before the show, I thought he was going to be even lower, when I kind of was like, all right, just give me your general idea so I kind of know how to rank this stuff or go about this stuff. And then when he talks about him on the show, it's like, oh no, yeah, like you said, he's like, he liked him. He didn't love him. He sees him, I think, more as a guard, even though he would try him at tackle. Because he even said to me, maybe off air, and I can't remember if he said this on air, he sees him more as a right tackle or guard, as opposed to a left tackle, which it is a little bit splitting hairs, but it also is just, it does matter, because, and when it really comes down to it, that's where you're going to face an ace out there. But I still like Campbell. Campbell to me is still, shoot, I would have still him as offensive lineman 2. I have Mimbao for, God, I go back and forth with his name, Mimbo from Mizzou as 1, but I think it's splitting hairs, because I think Mimbo is easier to project at tackle and staying at tackle. But I really like Campbell. I think no matter what, he's a winning player. And I said it on the pod, and I keep coming back to this. He is a best 5 enabler, which is, I think, is more important for modern day offensive line play than going like true left tackle, true left guard, true center. It's getting guys that have versatility that can play multiple spots and allow everybody else to play out there. Oh, get your best 5 out there. So I think that's a feather in Campbell's cap, but I still think Campbell's a top 12 pick. I think he's gonna be 5 or 6 or 7, somewhere around there on my updated big board. Like, I still see this guy as an easy top half of the first round player. It's just that there's guys that look or project as a true left tackle, which is the hardest thing to find on the offensive line. So it's kind of like, it all depends on the flavors that you want. But I still think of like the Bears, and Campbell is a great fit to me, because they're that top offensive line, not only just this year, but we're talking about year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5. He can slot in no matter where and actually get your best 5 out there, even if, you know, Tooney retires in 2 years, or Jonah Jackson actually, gets hurt, or something of that sort. Again, okay, well, we got Campbell. He can slot in as one of those guards. Okay, maybe we can try him at left tackle next year. And I think that's what I've come to the conclusion with Campbell. Not perfect prospect, but a very good one that allows you to just do a lot for your team.
Yeah, I think you said your dad. I'm talking about is well, Will Campbell's one of those players who's just going to play in the league just a very long time. Like he is. That's your projection. In terms of finding that true left tackle, I found your conversation about Josh Simmons just fascinating because if he's healthy, we're talking about maybe a top 5, top 7 pick right now, but he's not. So I think a lot of these teams are going to just knock him a grade or knock him around just because of his knee. Where do you kind of stand and all that? I know you and your dad talked a lot about that in your podcast, but it's been a while since then. Has your mind changed at all just in terms of where you think Simmons can go in this draft?
He is hard to project because not only the knee, his teams are a little worried with his character. And we didn't really get into it too much on the pod. And that's why I was really wanting my dad just focus on the tape, just focus on what he is, because I wanted to just paint that picture of how talented Josh Simmons is. But when we're talking about true left tackle types, that's why he was tackle 2 to my dad. It was Josh Carnaway, then Simmons. And it's because that is a guy that's a blindside protector. That is, I thought his best plays, Simmons, are in the run game when he was cutting things off on the backside, which requires a lot of athleticism, a lot of balance and technique, because you have to stay in position, use right hands or the correct hand usage and everything. And he was incredible on those. And that's like, you don't see that a lot, especially in college. So he is a true top 10 athlete at left tackle or at the offensive tackle position. So I was with my dad that if he were healthy, played the whole season, he's probably OT1 just off film. And I really do think that. And I think at worst, offensive lineman 3, somewhere in that range. To me, that's a 5, top 15, 5 to 15, somewhere in that range of this draft. But the thing is, too, his knee did explode and he has character stuff.
Not
So
good.
that's the whole player profile. And that I don't know where he ends up. Like, I really don't, because it's not character stuff where it's like, he's a little weird. It's like teams like are outright going like, we're dropping him a full round. And I haven't got anything like confirmation of a story or anything. And that's why I always hate to do the character stuff. But that is a part of his player profile right now, that is really dragging him down a little bit, because his tape, when he's healthy, indicates a top 15 left tackle. You know how hard those are to find? And so that's what I agree with my dad. I agree with the talent. I was glad that he said that, because that's what it indicated, but he only played 6 games this last year. But he was one of the most improved ascending players in the entire college football last year, any position, with talent to match. So kind of bummed to hear the other stuff coming up, but I think he's worth a chance for somebody in the 20s or in the early second round, because just what his player profile could be.
Yeah, I'll give a shout out here to Bob McGinn, who's been writing his scout profiles. He gets a ton of information. He's been doing this for years and years now, doing it at Go Long TD with Tyler Dunn. It's a great website you should check out. But yeah, I just pulled this up on Josh Simmons. I'll just share a piece of it. But in terms of the character issues, again, this is coming from scouts, but it's kind of a blank, said a 4th scout. His issues are more football character. He has a complete bullshit sense of urgency, like a total finesse player. Mental is an issue. Lack power, struggles to anchor. So that's getting a little bit off the character thing. But I think that's where some of that's coming from. But it is fair, especially when you combine it with the knee stuff. I want to switch to center a little bit. And don't worry, we'll get to Drew Dalman here. But before we get to Drew Dalman, who did sign with the Bears,
I was like, why are you guys having me on again?
Yeah. No, that wasn't the main thing. But your dad said something in that pod that just fascinated me. It was a great question by you, which I think he gave you credit for. I think he said, great question. But he talked, I didn't know that offensive line coaches actually did this. And I'm not sure they all do. Maybe it was something your dad did specifically, but he said that he would teach his centers coverages. And I don't know. Is that common? Do you know if that's common or not? But it just fascinated me, because he's like, yeah, I wanted my centers to be able to stand there at the line of scrimmage and start looking at the safeties like a quarterback would, to understand where, if you know the coverage, then you probably know where the pressure's coming from. I found that fascinating. And I loved hearing that, because if you have a center that can start doing that, especially if you have a young quarterback like Caleb Williams, boy, that's got to help a ton.
It does, and that's why I've been on this show for years. That's why I was so frustrated with the Bears center plan for years, because it's just such a, even if he's just a solid player, like a Aaron Brewer right now with the Dolphins. What is he? I would say 12th best center. But guess what? It helped out everybody else because he got everyone on the same page. And actually, some Bills, I want to say Cover One bloggers did a great job where they had their center, the Bills center, and they broke down a run play. And just hearing Connor McGovern talk about that, you see how he gets everyone on the same page just in this little pre-snap thing. And the coverage stuff, I'm glad you brought this up. Short answer would be no one really did that, and I would give credit to my dad that he popularized that among offensive line coaches. There once upon a time, my dad was considered an innovator at the offensive line position. He really was in the late '90s and early 2000s. A lot of the stuff he did, others copied in the NFL level. He got away; he was able to do it because he had this guy, Matt Burke, who was very smart and can kind of follow what he wanted to do. And there's other things that he did. Certain hot things, like if a guy blitzed off the edge, like they would throw hot and adjust the route. Like, and teams do that obviously with the receivers. He had a different version of that they instituted because the Bucks were doing things back in the Kiffin days that they had to answer for. So the coverage stuff that's why the quarterback center battery is so important in the modern NFL, because of that safety stuff. In the big picture, you have to see. Everyone thinks it's just the front and what the guys are doing in front of you. Oh, the defenders still think it sometimes too. Like, oh, I'm coming. Oh, I'm not coming. That's honestly, as a quarterback, if I stay in the shotgun, I could just stare at the safeties and just look and look and look and just wait. And safety, everybody else lies. Safeties don't lie because they have to cover up and they rotate to where pressure is coming from. So if a guy comes off the slot, the safety has to fill what we call, quarterbacks, we call it capping. Does he cap the slot? And then that's when you do a slot pressure is coming. Is the safety rotated to the boundary? Why is he rotated to the boundary when we have one receiver over there? And now they have a corner, a safety, and a linebacker to the boundary. Why is that happening? So for the center, it's all about number count. And this gets into protections. And my dad gave a lot of, because he put so much into the center, he gave centers a lot of freedom, which then allowed them to adjust protections more than others do. This is a great, this could be a 5-hour pod, because there's a great difference. The biggest difference you see with offenses today, what are the two that we basically hear? Shanahan offenses and everybody else. That's basically what it's come down to. But there's more families out there. Sean Payton's family, which Ben Johnson is, I consider, a part of. Now, because of what their offensive structure was with the Lions, they put a lot on the center. And they say that we can adjust all of this because we're going to block it up and then we're going to gash you. That is the more traditional way to beat the blitz, but that puts a lot on the center and the quarterback. And so my dad's thinking was, well, we had Dante Culpepper. He's not going to adjust protections, so we'll put it all in the center. When they're in Oakland, it was Rodney Hudson because they put it on the center and get everybody set. And then the quarterback can go, oh, we're protected, and I know I'm protected. I'm pinning the grenade. Let's go. Touchdown. And remember those old Vikings teams. And when you have a guy like Randy Moss, that was great. Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
It was because their thinking is block it up and we'll gash you. The other line of thinking, the Shanahan offense, is we'll throw hot. Then the quarterback has to know where the hot is. And defenses have adjusted to that. So there's no perfect way to do it. One requires a lot more work on everybody, the center, quarterback, blocking everybody up. But I think the rewards are greater. So that puts more on having a better center. That's the trickle down of that. If you're in the Shanahan offense, I just need an athlete at center. I don't need a guy that has to sort everything out perfect. We'll throw hot. We just got to get everyone set and we go. But if you get a guy that is smart, can get everyone sorted, puts more work on the coaches in the center, but the rewards are greater. So it's a lot, I know, but it's the safety rotation stuff was because he realized, well, we're adjusting all this stuff because of what the linebackers are doing. No, they're lying. The safety's showing what they're doing. So that's how we can get to the point where the other line that he didn't really get into is he calls it basketball count. If you ever play basketball, all right, if they trap us over here, there's got to be a reason. That means there's no one over there to cover those guys. So then we have to change the protection to get to the count. So it's visuals would be great here to kind of show it even more what I'm saying, but it is very important. It is something my dad kind of innovated. I would say he invented, but definitely, made it popular in the NFL to really focus on the back end play. I remember he told, sorry, this is a long answer.
No,
Even
this is great. I love it.
when
Yeah.
he was in Atlanta, and just an anecdotal story, my dad and Mike Nolan would drive to the airport together because they live near each other in Atlanta. And so when, to and from games, and Mike Nolan started talking to him, they were talking about some stuff. And then my dad goes, well, I have, who's the Joe Hawley was the center. I have Joe, your safety rotated over there. So that's why we kicked the protection over there. He goes, why is the safety going over there matter for your center? And my dad taught Mike Nolan, like, hey, oh no, I have the center. Look at where the safeties go. And Mike Nolan was like, what? Like, this is like 2014. And Mike Nolan's like, what? The center looks at the safe. Like, he could not believe that they were at that level. Guess what? That's what you have to do now because defenses have already got more exotic and more crazy. And that's who doesn't lie. So it's just one of those things where it takes extra effort, but it makes sense once you kind of figure out why you make that effort.
So enter Drew Dahlman, your guy from Stanford here, who is now the new center of the Chicago Bears. Got a massive deal. He is going to be protecting Caleb Williams and calling out the safeties, it sounds like, for Caleb Williams. What do you think? I know we talked about Drew on our last podcast with you, but now he's here. What do you think?
Talked about Drew, and then they made 2 trades for offensive linemen like in 12 hours after we recorded. After they made those moves, I like the Drew Dahlman signing a lot better. I thought it would just be Drew Dahlman and we draft a guy, and I was like, oh boy. But now you got some dudes on either side, in theory. Joe Jackson's healthy. Jackson's a stud. If he's healthy, he's so good. It's just that it's health. That's really it. And then Tooney, I love. Joe Tooney is one of my favorite players in the NFL. It's at guard, but it's getting Dahlman in there. And why I had some reservations was, all right, you're dropping a bunch of money to a center. Don't think he's perfect because I think they are more powered gap scheme heavy, like they were with the Lions. That's why I'm like, maybe this guy is more of an above average quality player that in a couple of years you should move on from. Now that they've kind of boosted the rest of the offensive line, I think Ben Johnson, maybe just reading between the lines, has indicated that they're going to be more zone heavy, which would probably put more zone in the run game, more boots for Caleb. That makes a lot of sense. Dahlman's perfect for that. And also I've kind of reflected on that or really marinated on it and I think I've said this on the show before, that sometimes going from, shit to not shit is a great improvement. Like, you don't have to go from the worst center to
It's
an
good to
amazing
be better than
center.
shit.
It's going to be better than shit. Do I think he is a all pro center? I don't. But do I think he's a solid center? Yeah. He's a starting quality center, which is like, that's been needed for a while. And yes, you probably splurge on it, but at least you know what you're getting. And I think they have the reinforcements around him, or a supporting cast around him with the guards, that I like his fit a lot better. And I like the thinking behind this a lot better. So, but really it's going to help out Caleb so much. Just the mental load. It really is, where he doesn't have to think like, did I get that point correct? Did I communicate that? The center's got it. I'm telling you guys, watch this Connor McGovern clip. Watch how much he handles on this just one run play that turns into a touchdown. And the quarterback doesn't even know. Josh Allen, who is pretty smart pre-snap, is like, just snap it. But there's McGovern getting everyone set. That's what these guys do. Even if they're just solid playing wise, if they have the mental capacity like a former Stanford guy does, it's just going to get everyone lined up and going the right way, which it's going to really have a boost effect because now they have some more talent around him.
Nate, I got one more offensive line question for you because, this is a player that I thought for a couple weeks now wasn't getting enough buzz, wasn't talked about enough. It's Kelvin Banks, the left tackle from Texas. I don't know why. Like, I'm reminded of this every year now when we look at offensive linemen. Maybe it's just our reference point with Ryan Poles, but a couple years ago with Darnell Wright, there he is, late 20s pick, late first round pick, and then he gets drafted at 10. They put him through this grueling workout at Tennessee. The Bears and maybe some other teams were higher on Wright than the outsiders. Yeah. Do you think Kelvin Banks is like maybe that guy this year who's top 10, top 15?
I do. And this is really just in the last week. I would say this. If you asked me a month ago, I'd be like, no, he's probably in the 20s. I think teams in the league like him maybe more than the public does. Maybe even more than me. I can't figure out whether I like him at tackle or guard, but I do like him. I just couldn't get around on him too. Is that I thought some of his finishing wasn't what I wanted to see, which I actually, going back to even tying into my dad liked Bank. This was the biggest surprise grade, I would say, for me, even more than Connerly or Simmons or anything, was my dad liking Banks. I
Hmm.
actually thought Banks wouldn't be his flavor. Because of the finishing stuff. My dad's all about toughness and all that stuff, but he likes big athletic tough guys. I mean, don't we all? But so and this is also a problem with my dad's evaluations. He always assumes he's coaching them. So he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna get him out." So that's always sometimes a little grain of salt. But no, with Banks, he liked him way more than I thought. And honestly, maybe it's one of these things where it's like, yeah, he's not doing this, he's not doing this. And sometimes he needs someone to go like, but what can he do? And there my dad's pointing out, there he is 20 yards down the field on a screen,
Yeah.
looking like a
All those
freak.
perimeter screens that Texas would run. Yeah.
Athletic plays, real athletic plays, real ones. Not, oh, okay, that's some nice footwork there. Like real in space stuff. And that's what I'm like looking at. I'm like, yeah, I get. And he's started since a true freshman. He's got plenty of starts under his belt. He's held up against top competition. Yeah, the Georgia games were rough, but that was rough for the entire Texas offensive line. So I would say he's one of those guys I think the league isn't higher than maybe, and I'm not saying like totally change, but I think like a 10 spot difference. So I agree with you, your original question, that I think he ends up going in the maybe top 15, top 16, where I think maybe even me, I thought he'd be more in the guy in the 20s. And I'm still trying to figure out whether tackle or guard, but I think that's actually some of the appeal. My dad says, I think he could play both. And I was like, oh, okay. And that's was part of the appeal, as I think he had him as O lineman 3 overall because of some of that versatility. And, that's where it gets into what can he do as opposed to what he can't do. It's big and athletic
You,
and long. That's hard to find.
Yeah, exactly, and I think your dad made that point a couple times too, when it's just
Yeah.
you can't teach the size. You said something though when you were talking about Banks though, where I turned into the Leonardo DiCaprio meme in my car as I was listening, where I'm like pointing. I'm like, yeah, because but I don't know if you said this exactly, but it was along these lines of like, I just can't get over how he has like a guard's ass.
Yeah,
Like
I can't.
you look at him and you're like, yeah, that's a guard, but
And my
actually he
dad
plays tackle
sandbagged me.
pretty damn well.
Didn't
Yeah.
even laugh at that. That's got someone else like got that because he does. He has the ass of a guard. Like I look at him like that's a guard's ass. Like I don't know. I wish I had better scouting a line or something than that. But my dad was just like, mm-hmm. He just totally sandbagged me. So
Can I ask you about the top tight ends quickly, because you
yeah,
wrote a long piece on Yahoo about
kept
Tyler
going and going.
Warren and Colson Loveland, and I think Bears fans have started to come around to the idea of drafting at least Warren at number 10, because he's
I'm all in personally, man. I
Adam's
I
all
don't even
in.
think they need a tight end that bad, but this dude, eh, when I hear Ben Johnson and he was actually talking about, Jahmyr Gibbs in this context, why they drafted him in Detroit, he's just like, well, he's a weapon. He wasn't a running back. He was a weapon. Like, that's how I look at Tyler Warren. I'm like, he's not a tight end. He's a weapon that you could do 100 different things with him.
Mhm. I like both of them, and this is what I went in going, Warren, clearly I like better, before I wrote that article. And just kind of peek into my process, because I focus so much on the NFL during the season as I try to do a pick board during the season, which is something I might not volunteer to do next year. Is during the season I watch about 2 games. And I'll be honest, it's not a deep dive 4 or 6 games like I do after the season. And then I go position by position. So like, okay, usually running backs is the first position I knock out. Then, well, that's a lie, quarterbacks. Then running backs, just go down the list. Always corners are last. I can tell you, quarterback, I won't be finishing up my corner evals for another couple weeks. Because yeah, it's boring. But when watching these tight ends and watching Warren and watching Loveland back to back, watching 6 games of them, pulling clips, looking at stats, I really came around that I prefer Loveland, which is not what I expected going into the process. Watching them, Loveland battled a little injury this year, but even the common refrain has been, oh, his film is better in 2023, which I actually was a part of that refrain. I was saying that as well. And then as I watched the season go along before he kind of succumbed to the injury, this dude has true inline potential as a blocker. And that is so hard to find. It's Lewis. It's Chris Manhertz. It's these guys that are so just that's all they do. They're a de facto tackle out there. Loveland's 20. And his highlights, if you really have heard about what his strengths are, is as a receiving tight end. and you watch him, he does not move like a 6'6", 250-pounder. I actually did not expect him to measure in that well or that big because he is such a fluid mover. So I even had him pigeonholed, receiving tight end, receiving tight end. Sam Laporta, receiving tight end, receiving tight end. Sam Laporta is not a good blocker, so that was always a qualm with me. And then I watched Loveland. There he is in line at Michigan, attached to the tackle, boom, blocking the ends, moving them, extending the arms, perfect footwork, everything. And that's with a bum arm, 20 years old, and on an awful offense. And there he is battling his ass off in the run game. Okay. Watch Warren. Warren is a bull in a china shop. He's a good athlete, but it's like his athleticism is in different ways. It's body control, it's strength, it's balance, but when I watch him, a lot of his blocking, and I think Penn State's coaches did a good job of this, was a lot of him in motion, a lot of him on outside zone where he's getting help from the tackle, which is not the damn Warren saying, oh, he can't do that. But it wasn't the same. He wasn't asked to do the same blocks as Loveland. And that to me is always is that because he can't do it, or is it because the coaches won't call it? But they were so deliberate in keeping Warren away from those tough blocks that I was like, okay, that's interesting. A lot of his good blocks are against DBs, where he's a lead blocker on a linebacker, but it's not against DNs and big types on the outside. Again, this is splitting hairs, but we're talking about tight ends in the top 20. I'm going to split a lot of hairs. And so that Warren's older, that 2 years older, and then also didn't measure in long arms, sub 32-inch arms, which that also arm length, and we've talked about this before, is run blocking and run defending, because that's how you can extend and keep those guys away from you. So I kind of got down on Warren as a blocker. I would say bad. I think he's just more like, you have to hide him a little bit. I picture him more like a Trey McBride, who just got paid the highest contract in tight end history, or Dallas Clark, who I really like. Colts, Iowa, same number 44. But those tight ends have to be paired with a dirty work guy and a guy that can be the inline guy and be the blocking guy. Dallas Clark always played with Ben Utek, who's just a de facto tackle back out there. So this is a long-winded way to say is the blocking aspect is why I actually came around on Loveland. When going in, I thought that would be Warren's strength. And Warren's good at it. It's just the asks and the tasks and the assignments are a little easier than what Loveland was asked to do. And I think Loveland's youth and fluid athleticism, I'm like, this guy could be a dynamite tight end, like a true top 3 guy that's blocking as well, which is so hard to find. While I think Warren has to be hidden in some ways, but his receiving ability is excellent. Long-winded way to say again, Ben Johnson, though, is one of the best coaches in the NFL at hiding tight ends. He did with Laporta a ton. He puts guys on the move. He RPOs them. He has them on the backside. He puts them in motion and has them cutting across. He did this a ton with Sam Laporta. So, like the Bears drafting Warren, I'm totally for, because I know this offensive coach knows how to quote unquote hide him in those areas while also accentuating his talents or highlighting his talents, which I think are a lot because he's so good with the ball in his hands. But really, my last mock draft, I had the Bears taking Loveland, because I've actually have really marinated on it and really have started to like it. I still like Derek Harmon there too from Oregon, but this is, I don't know, Loveland really grew on me, where I went from like, oh yeah, he's a good first round tight end, to now I'm like, man, this guy might be a top 10, top 12 talent in this draft. And I'm glad I did that study and did the 6 games and everything on him, because that's what I came around to, that this is a true possibility as an inline 3-down tight end that's like could be an 800,000 yard receiver for you as well. And you don't find those. Those are really hard to find. So yeah, Loveland slightly, but I consider both of them top 20 talents in this draft. And so, yeah, I don't want to dog Warren too much. I just want to boost Loveland a little bit.
Well, I was going to end this with, I guess you sort of answered the question, at least pointing to your last mock draft, but just if you look at the Bears at 10, like who's your guy? Like who's the guy that you're just like, this makes so much sense. Maybe outside of Loveland, since you just mentioned him, but is there some guy that you think the way the board will probably fall that you feel like would be there that you wouldn't be able to pass on if you were Ben Johnson and Ryan Poles?
Well, I think if Campbell's there, Will Campbell from LSU is there, you have to take it. I said that on the last show I was with you guys, that if he's there at 10, you run up and get him, because I just think that not only, we talked about his talent stuff, but also the intangible stuff. And he's one of the smartest guys I've watched, because, and my dad mentioned this too, is that you don't see the left tackles in college pointing out blitzes. They're just very much like, what do I got? Okay, cool. He's like IDing stuff for Garrett Nussmeier, the quarterback, and going like, hey, this guy's coming, slide that way, slide that way. You don't see left tackles doing that at 20 years old. Like that's a rare thing. So I think that also you can kind of see what the Bears I think are doing, and also like the Seahawks are a team like this too. Getting some these guys in, some football guys in. And I'm not trying to sound corny because Campbell's a good athlete too, but it's just like getting these guys that are all about it, the intangible stuff and boosting all that. Like Joe Tooney and Will Campbell on your offensive line room, like heck yeah. Like those are guys, those are leaders. Remember I came on the last show and you guys talked about like there was no leaders in the O-line room. It's like, man, you get Tooney, who's one of the all-time kind of personalities, and now you get a young guy that has that type of personality. Like I just think not only talent wise, but just demeanor wise, that would be such a good thing for this team. But he's a guy that I think would just be amazing. But Loveland is another one, and then I'll mention Derek Harmon again, from Oregon. I like his versatility. I think he'd be a lot of fun on this defensive line with Dennis Allen, and how he would use him as well. So that's another guy that I really just like the fit and where the defensive tackles are at for the Bears at right now.
Love it. Nate Tice. Make sure you're checking out his podcast, Football 301. He's writing on Yahoo. And it's not just the episode with his dad, by the way. He's got position breakdowns on that podcast feed. I'm already starting to go through them. I know you had Dane on to talk about the quarterbacks, too. So a lot of good stuff. Great show.
You guys don't have
Appreciate
to worry
you
about
jumping on
that.
as always.
You guys are good there. Which running backs do you guys like? Because the Bears absolutely got to take a running back, right? So which ones have you guys preferred any? Because there's so many good ones.
Well, I've been infatuated with the idea of Genty at 10 for a while, but I don't think he's going to be there.
Did you see what Yeah, I think Pete Prisco did a trade up. Bears trading up to the Jacks to take Genty.
No, don't do that. I wouldn't do that. So like, and then like we just had breakfast, or it's not the breakfast anymore, whatever you want to call it now at the NFL owners meetings.
Yeah,
and, and Ben Johnson kept talking about like, I like different skill sets in my running backs room. So we had David Montgomery. Jahmyr Gibbs is different than David Montgomery. So I'm thinking we got DeAndre Swift. So who's your David Montgomery like back? So I'm looking at Judkins from Ohio State a lot now in the second round.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many. It's so many cool flavors.
I'd probably say that my guy in the second round would be Caleb Johnson from Iowa. Because again, I think it's that compliment to what they already have. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, Johnson runs a lot like what's his face, Arian Foster. And my first comparison for him was he was Honey, I Shrunk Derrick Henry. That was kind of my, because he runs just like him, because he's upright and everything. He looks just like him. That was my first. Yeah, so if you're kind of like more the thumper type to pair with Swift, Damian Martinez from Miami. This would be a fun one on day 2, maybe early round 3, or
like number 72.
72. That's exactly his range. I think others are coming around on him, but Cam Scatterby is almost like a meme at this point, but he's good too. Devin Neal, who I consider a smaller version of David Montgomery. They run exactly alike. They have the same 3-down skill set. I brought him up before. No, there's some. Judkins is another one too. Travion Henderson's probably a no-go, even though I like him a lot, but that's speed and pass protection. It's like, no, we need a guy that can run between the tackles and stay within the running lanes. But no, there's some fun guys, but something about Devin Neal with the Bears, I just can't unbreak my brain on that, especially where I think he'll go, which is that 3rd round pick. I don't know. It's a good running back class. It's a good year to need a running back like the Bears.
And that's why, and I think you mentioned Neal last time you're on too. Look, if Genty were to actually fall to 10, I wouldn't have any problem with the Bears taking him.
I wouldn't either,
because I just think he's special, but I think that's unlikely, and I don't think I would trade up for him because of the depth that's just available there in the 2nd and 3rd round.
That's what I've come to. If Genty ends up there, it's one of those where I'm nodding my head and go, totally get it. He's just that type of player. His over under has moved up from 12.5, where he goes in the draft, to 8.5 in the last couple of weeks. So
that's a significant jump.
Kind of shows you what the league, I think, league is kind of leaning, so that he's probably going to be gone before 10. But special player.
Nate, thanks so much, man.
Thanks, guys. See you soon.
Thanks, Nate.
Always love talking to Nate Tice. And that was fun to have some conversations about his dad too. Just got that very unique football coach voice.
I was gonna say, he's got a football voice, like Like Matt
Yeah.
Bowen, that's a football voice.
Yeah.
Mike Tice,
Yes.
that's a football voice.
Yeah. And some of the things he says in that pod, I couldn't help but giggle. He was talking about how one guy plays too erect. I'm like, that's football. This guy bends at the waist. Yeah. Okay. I just loved. I highly recommend listening to it because it's a lot of fun.
Whenever a conversation kind of gets into a guy's butt size, you're talking some serious offensive lineman football.
Oh yeah.
And that's where their conversation went for a little bit with Nate and his dad. And just go check out that podcast.
Yeah. Especially if you're a Bears fan that was around or really engaged when he was, talking weekly as the Bears OC. It's I remember doing some of those interviews, especially in Bourbonnais. Just great. I always like Mike Tice. So anyway, good stuff there. Talking to Nate, deep dive on the O lineman and beyond. So always love having Nate on the show. And we go from our friend Nate Tice to our other really good friend Kevin Fishbain, who you also hear plenty of times on this podcast. He got sick of us though, so he started his own pod, and he's going big time on us, which is good for him. Hey, Kevin.
Hey guys. By the way, nobody would ever confuse me for having football coach voice.
I was going to say me too, and I am a coach.
What?
Baseball coach voice?
I've got the youth baseball coach voice down. Yeah. It's different than podcast voice.
I've developed a very good for football that also works in baseball when we coach. Give it a shot next time you're out there with your kids. Good, hard, emphatic, hey, gets the boys' attention almost immediately, especially when they're young little rascals.
Well, what kind of voice are you using on your new podcast where you had your first guest be Joe Davis, who another guy who has a very unique voice that I'm very jealous of?
Joe's got an incredible voice. Joe Davis is the first guest on my new podcast, Breaking In with Kevin Fishbain, that tells the origin stories of your favorite sports media personalities. You could follow it right now on Spotify, Apple, Overcast, Podcasts. You guys know the drill. Wherever you get your podcasts. I am banking on the Hoge Jahns community to help get this podcast off the ground.
Well, wait, were you reading the script there?
No, I've read it. I've said that
You're
a lot over
so
the
many
years,
plugs. Okay,
or over the weeks as I've been getting ready. So yeah, episode 1 is out Wednesday. Episodes will come out every Wednesday morning, and I actually have a breaking announcement on that I can deliver on this podcast.
Break the news.
I haven't said this to anybody yet. So I was thinking that this summer is the 10-year anniversary of the beginning of the Hoge Jahns show.
Wow.
And I don't think there's any better way to celebrate than having the two of you on my podcast, which by August is going to be probably one of the most listened to podcasts in the world.
Yeah.
And you guys are going to be right there.
Mm-hmm.
And you guys are going to be my guests, and we're going to talk about the origin story of the Hoge Jahns podcast.
Where do you want to record this? Fun. In the old Hoge basement down the street here? We could ask if we could use it.
What about that old door?
Just knock on hey, this guy used to live here. Do you mind if we go in your basement?
Hallis Hall coat closet.
Yeah.
They've filled that to the point where we can't use it anymore. No, and I also like your strategy. Like you waited till you're on the show to basically tell us we're doing this so that Johns can't say no in July.
They'll have baseball.
This is a guilt trip request. I guess I'm in.
If it's
during the day, I'm okay.
I'm glad you brought this up, though. I did look this up. The anniversary, I believe, now I got to relook it up, but I believe it's July 28th. So we do need to put some things together. I don't know if there's any establishments out there listening that might be interested in hosting something, because I will definitely procrastinate on this and not plan it with the diligence that it actually needs. So I should probably get moving on it, but it is 10 years coming up, which is pretty crazy.
And I assume by establishment, you don't mean like Bob Dabrowski's basement. You mean like actually go
right.
Yeah.
No.
Well, Bob Dabrowski actually has quite a few bar contacts in the city of Chicago. Believe it or
All
not.
right,
I bet
Bob.
he does.
When Bob's
Get to-
listening, he'll be
get to work,
he'll be
Bob.
busy. Yes, Bob, there's your assignment.
We might need like a
Yeah.
Mickey Finn's and Liberty. Like that's training camp time. So we might need to do like somewhere north after we're at Hallis on a training camp practice or something like that. We could just go down to Bourbonnais, go to Brickstone.
Just for old times' sake.
Just for fun. All right. Well, yes, the podcast is called Breaking In. As Kevin said, it is available wherever you listen to your podcast. So you have a duty as a Hoge Jahns listener, viewer, to go hit subscribe, help support the new show. And we hear all the time from people that, want to hear, how'd you get into this? How do I do it? All that stuff. Well, that's what this podcast is really for. You can get a lot of stories on how prominent people broke in and into this business. So it's congrats on the show. It's going to be great.
Thank you. I'm excited. As you said, it's the focus is really just going to be on everyone's kind of first job or internship. As you said, Joe Davis, voice of the World Series. Fun fact about Joe: Joe did not call a single Bears game this year. He was in this weird. He was the number two NFC team for Fox, and the Bears were either kind of had that brief moment where they were good enough to get Brady, but then they dropped below the Joe Davis line and never got a Joe Davis game this year. But I'm sure
You don't want to be below the Joe Davis line. That's how you measure your success in a football season, I think.
so. They did not, but I'm sure Bears fans will hear Joe Davis calling a couple games next year. As you'll hear on the podcast, I'm not going to spoil all of it. Joe and I interned together, so there's some synergy in him kind of being the first guest. Obviously, he has put together an incredible career. Since then, I like to joke about the number of World Series games that he and I have combined to call. So, Johns, what that joke is that Joe has called a bunch of World Series that I haven't called any.
I understand, even though you did lose my interest for a second there. just kidding.
But I will
He
tell-
heard World Series and baseball and just blacked out.
So I'm going to try
Way
to
too early
do-
for that conversation, but yes.
try to do a lot of sports, a lot of different people's different sports, just broadcasters, writers, reporters, anchors. I'm going to mix in Chicago people too. And I will tell you that if you're an NFL fan, you will really like the 2 episodes around the draft. So episode 3 is the day before the draft. Episode 4, the Wednesday after the draft. You will like the hearing about the first jobs for those guests for sure.
Cool.
That's awesome. All right.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, 100%. Everybody go hit that subscribe button immediately. In the meantime, we did have some news at Hallis Hall today. The Bears did something a little bit different, which I know I appreciated. I think we all did, but had some significant media availability to kick off the offseason program. We got to hear from Caleb Williams, from Jalen Johnson, Jermaine Edmonds, and Darnell Wright. Probably at least a couple captains in that group, potentially, and 4 prominent players regardless on the roster. And I mean, I thought it was great to be able to hear like the fresh first impressions. Not having to wait a few weeks until that mini camp coming up, but to really hear like, okay, you heard from Ben Johnson for the first time in a meeting literally yesterday. You came in this morning. Caleb's already talking about how they did, a quiz on what they learned yesterday. Kevin, just have any overall takeaways from what we heard today? Because I know it's April. It doesn't really matter a ton, but actually, I don't know. In my opinion, it does actually matter what these guys' first impressions are and the coaching staff having to win over the trust of the players pretty fast.
Well, and I think that Jalen Johnson's probably sorry, guys. Pat Finley is calling me right now.
Put him on.
Doesn't he know we're podcasting? Let's put him on here.
Tell him.
Is he
Hey
FaceTiming?
Pat, you're live on the Hoge Jahns podcast and you're on speakerphone.
Oh, hey, what's up, guys?
Hi, Pat.
I don't think
John
Pat's gonna be able
saying
to hear
hi.
us.
I guess they're
Yeah,
in my
yeah.
headphones. Do you have any thoughts about the first day of media availability today, Pat?
Yeah, it was good.
All right, talk to you later, Pat.
Bye.
Was that a Potsy
think-
impression? The hell was
I think
that?
Pat probably contractually is not allowed to go on your show. So,
Well, he just got
There
fired.
is your
then.
episode of Halos Intrigue, everybody.
Nice.
so, Jalen Johnson, his sixth year with the Bears. This is his third head coach, which kind of came up, and he was, Jalen was great because he walked in and goes, "You guys surprised to see me here?" I was a little. I mean, were you guys surprised? I was a little surprised.
Well, like they put out like 40 pictures of all the guys going through, and when I got to the Jalen Johnson one, which was one of the last ones, wasn't it? Like
yeah,
I
you
was
were looking for Jalen while you're going through those pictures. I was.
Yeah,
Like,
you're
he's
looking for
kind
the
of guy
notable
that-
players.
Yeah.
So yes, I was kind of surprised that he had shown up for the voluntary portion of the offseason.
But the message that he echoed, that Tremaine Edmonds also mentioned, was this idea of that, like, they want to dominate their opponents, and that starts with, like, that mindset is obviously something they got from Ben Johnson at his introductory speech yesterday, and something that they want to, like, and Jalen Johnson was like, it starts like now, like, to build up that mindset. And I thought it was kind of unique, just like, I mean, it makes sense. Obviously, when you're talking about sports, you want to dominate your opponent, but I don't know if you guys noticed, the Bears don't really ever dominate their opponent, or at least haven't in a long time. And the Lions definitely did. And I think the players probably respect, hey, here's Ben Johnson. This guy's done it. And we know that he's done it. And this is what the way he wants us to envision it. And it starts right now. So I thought that was an interesting thing to hear from Jalen Johnson and Tremaine Edmonds.
Well, yeah, and then sometimes we'll hear back to back from players in press conference settings, and they'll repeat the same message, and you're like, "Oh, wait a minute, that must be something that the coaches instilled in a meeting today or something like that." And I think you're right. That's obviously where that came from. And I already got some pushback from some people that were like, "Well, you know what? Let's just start with winning games before we start talking about winning by 7." Did he say 17 or 70? There's been a debate.
I heard 17.
That's what I thought too. So. I don't know.
70
Bragg said
strikes me as a lot.
Yeah, well, but he could have been exaggerating.
Yeah.
Regardless, here's the thing, though. There is a difference, because not just in the numbers, but there's a big difference between beating the Titans because Will Levis threw a weird-ass pass towards the sideline. You got a break, and you didn't play that well, and you won that football game. And beating a Rams team that actually turned out to be pretty good by the time the season was over, but their entire offensive line and basically team was hurt when they came to Soldier Field, and you still kind of squeaked that one out. And then compared to what they did in London, where they actually dominated the Jaguars from about the middle second quarter on, like, then you felt a lot different after that game, right? So if you can start doing that to opponents you should beat, that does instill a different level of confidence, because remember, even after that Titans win, we were hearing about meetings already and, like, you got to coach us harder type stuff. The red flags were all over, even when the Bears were winning some games early. So I do like that mentality of, like, no, we're not just here to win. We want to dominate our opponent. That's a different mindset than the Bears have had in the past.
The Lions, by the way, had 6 wins last year of at least 17 points, and the Bears had 2.
I think that's
What was
a good
the second one?
Panthers.
See, that doesn't even count.
It did, but yeah, not really. I was
They
trying to
won that
get
game by 26.
the butt kicking.
I don't even remember. I literally do not remember that game at all.
Did Bryce Young not start that game?
Andy Dalton played,
Yeah.
right?
I think you're right, but Bryce Young came in.
Oh, yeah. Bryce
Maybe at
Young
the
did come
end?
in.
Boy, that
There was a
not very
touchdown to
memorable
DJ
game.
Moore, if not multiple.
Yeah, I feel like he had a big game against his former team. That makes sense. Cool.
We're already at the point where we have removed that from our memory. And we're now on to the do's and don'ts that Ben Johnson tried to explain during his introductory press conference.
So that would have been so that was between Rams and London, I think is what that was. Yeah, because that was the game where Jaquan Brisker got his concussion. Now I remember that game.
Tackling Tommy Tremble.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense now. Kevin, you okay? No? Might have lost his hearing. It's going to be hard to do your own podcast when you can't hear anything.
A few moments later.
All right, Kevin's looks like he's got his headphones back now. And apparently this is John Greenberg's fault, we understand.
Yeah, well, those headphones, they don't need to be recharged very often, but today of all days, in this moment of all moments, and as Adam Johns reminded me, John Greenberg did borrow those headphones earlier today.
He had to transcribe Darnell Wright.
And as you guys know, John is an avid listener to this podcast, so he will respond to this segment.
In his own
By the
John
way,
Greenberg way.
I went up to John at the combine. I said, "Hey, John." He goes, "Yeah." I said, "I'm starting a podcast." He looked at me and goes, "Why?"
Oh, John.
Why?
Okay.
How would you, Kev? We got to wrap up our thoughts too on like Florida, the trip to Palm Beach, where we had the NFL owners meetings. 30 minutes with Ben Johnson, George McCaskey, Kevin Warren. The next day, 15 minutes with Ryan Poles. Like,
We got to talk about your piece too, Johns,
yeah.
on the hire.
Any takeaways, Kev? Like, just in terms of the direction of the Bears, and anything you came away thinking positively or negatively about when it came to this franchise?
Well, selfishly, as a reporter, I kind of liked how open Ben Johnson was about players he hasn't even seen play on the field yet. And he did throw in a lot of caveats about needs to see them on the grass. And he never, I don't think, critiqued a player or told us something he hasn't told that player already. Like we know he's probably talked to Cole Kmet about run blocking, right? But for him to say that, to talk about that, I thought was kind of setting a good tone. These guys are all adults. They're professionals. They should be able to handle it. And I like that he was just open. We've had several Bears coaches over the years that would never talk about players in that way. So I kind of like that. And I just think that, like the vibes are very positive right now. And I think they should be. They got the coach they wanted. They've got the linemen they wanted. They have their quarterback, because so much of the conversation at these meetings, we're sitting around these tables and it's like everyone's at Kevin O'Connell's table trying to figure out what the Vikings are going to do at quarterback. And then, everyone's talking to Seattle's staff about Sam Darnold. Then you're hearing the Raiders, talking about Geno Smith and what are the Titans going to do? Are they going to take Cam Ward? Who are the Giants going to take? And the Colts with Anthony Richardson versus Daniel Jones. Like, well, the Bears are good. Like, they're set. And I think that was also something when you're with every coach and GM around the league, you kind of, obviously there's a lot of quarterback talk, and the Bears don't have to have that quarterback talk right now.
So what do we think was the weirder quote that came out of somebody's mouth? Was it George McCaskey saying, "I don't want that smoke" to Adam Johns? Or was it me saying, "We on that ass" to Ben Johnson? Because I think both of them are pretty hard to picture.
No, let me get the quote right here from George McCaskey. He was quoting Ben Johnson. This is a Ben Johnson, the Bears' new head coach, who wanted to stay in the NFC North. Remember those, like looking back at the hiring search, there was that conversation, like, why would Ben Johnson want to coach in the NFC North where it's so difficult? Like, I hated that. Like, if you want to be a head coach, you want to face the best. You want to beat the best. If you don't, then, well, you're not on my list anymore. Ben Johnson did.
Don't give all this context. It's way more fun when you take these quotes out of context and you don't know why they're said. Because mine has context too. I was quoting somebody else as well.
So this is the quote from George McCaskey. This is talking about, here's more context. I'm going to ignore everything you just said to provide you the context. Johnson wanted to coach in the NFC North, where he'd face Dan Campbell and the Lions, Matt LaFleur and the Packers, and Kevin O'Connell and the Vikings twice a season. He made that clear in his interview as well. He said, "I want that smoke," McCaskey said. You can read about that on the theathletic.com headline.
And
Can I read the headline real quick? An inside
Yes.
look at the start of the Bears' new era as Ryan Poles hired Ben Johnson. By me.
some might call it a new Bera.
Oh, nobody is calling
Nobody.
it a new era.
Except for probably JJ Stankovitz. He would call it that.
Well, Johns can tell you that I got a sneak peek at that story over the weekend, and the first thing I texted Johns was, "I wish I was in the room to hear George say, 'I want that smoke,' even if he was quoting Ben Johnson."
So I'm interviewing George in that, well, in the conference room. That'd be last Wednesday morning, and as soon as he said that, it's like you write it down and you like circle it. that's getting in the story some way, in some form.
Yeah.
It's got to be in there.
Absolutely, it's got to be in there, 100%. All right, well, it was John's always does a really good job with those sort of behind the scenes, how the hiring went down piece. So make sure you check that out in The Athletic, theathletic.com/Hoge Jahns. Get a good timeline for how it all went down, especially in the less than 48 hours after the Lions lost to the Commanders. And I was impressed with how prepared Ryan Poles was in kind of the whole process.
Should we do a power rankings of Johns' inside the head coach hiring stories?
Ooh.
Well, I will admit that I texted Kevin this morning, Johns. I'm just a little bit worried about what happens if Ben Johnson's actually good and like he's here for 10 years. Like, what are you gonna write? Like, you're not gonna have another like
I've got good at these.
you're not gonna have an inside the hire piece to write.
Well, I think everybody remembers the Ted Phillips and George McCaskey and Ryan Pace, like flying through like a thunderstorm to get to Matt Nagy in Kansas City, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The bomb cyclone.
Bomb cyclone.
What was it?
It hit like the Northeast, right? Wasn't that on they were on their way to Josh McDaniels?
I remember the airport that they landed in, Hanscom Airport. Ted Phillips told a long story about that. Yes, I brought that up in my conversation with George as well, and he still got a chuckle about how stunned or how shocked Ted Phillips was on the plane as that thing was going through some major turbulence and some major storm.
Sounds terrible. No,
But to answer your question, Adam,
Yeah.
maybe I'll just focus on draft prospects, like the ones they hit. We'll just go with that.
Okay.
Behind the scenes.
Well, it's good stuff as always. And I enjoyed reading about it, so make sure everybody checks it out in The Athletic. And Kevin's got his new pod dropping tomorrow. Like first thing in the morning, it'll be up.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the trailer's up right now if you want to hear me talk
Right.
for 2 minutes about the podcast. But yes, the first episodes will be Wednesday morning. They'll be in your feed.
Got it. Awesome. Looking forward to that. I think that's gonna do it for us. So, any final thoughts from either of you guys?
Kev, the floor is yours.
I'm trying to think of how many Chicago sports personalities I should have on before I do the Hoge Jahns origin story.
Yeah. You got to push us down a lot. Like,
I mean,
Well,
I will say.
Well, there's some I want to be ahead of.
I will say episode 7 is a Chicago sports media personality.
how many episode 7? How far along are you on
I've
this thing?
I've not
Jesus
recorded
Christ.
I've not recorded 7 yet, but I've kind of been spacing them out because I want some of them to be somewhat time relevant. Like I mentioned, I have a couple NFL people for episodes 3 and 4, which are on the draft.
Great. So we're at least number 8, Johns.
Training camp. I already got it. July
Training camp.
28th, 2025.
10-year
That's what I'm talking
anniversary.
to
This
Kevin
is how
about
this-
St. Norbert College.
you guys can tell little stories about your first jobs, and then we'll talk about the beginning of the Hoge Jahns podcast. It'll be
I got
home and home.
fired. I got fired from my first journalism gig.
Save it for the podcast. Oh,
I know I am. It's a teaser. It's called the teaser. You
Great.
got to subscribe to Kevin's breaking in, and it was
Johns can
technically
teach people what agate is.
I can. Very underappreciated part of this business.
That sounds terrible. I don't want to listen to that. I wouldn't lead with that. All right. We are out of here. We'll have another episode for you on Thursday. We're going to talk to Eric Edholm from NFL.com. A little bit more draft conversation. It was great having Nate on the show today. Again, make sure you go check out that podcast with his dad. We were talking about Football 301, Kevin's pod. We're just promoting all kinds of pods today. So there's your homework assignment. Go check out those 2 pods. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you subscribe to this one too. Hit the like button. If you listen as a pod, go check out the YouTube channel. Please hit subscribe. Vice versa. If you watch on YouTube, please go hit the podcast feed wherever you listen to your podcast. Helps grow the show. Thank you very much for doing that. HoganJahns.com is where all the merch is. We will be back later on in the week. We'll talk to you then.
See ya.